folks. As we approach volume number 15, I thought I'd combine all the strange national park missing person cases that we've covered together so far and into one video. Whether you're a truck driver or just in it for the long haul, I thought it might be a little more convenient for you to do it this way. With the exception of Volume 1 due to bad sound quality and Volume 8, which we no longer have, I'm going to list these videos in order according to their date, ranging from the oldest to the most currently. Stay tuned for more videos, including the interview that Carl and I will be doing, and also a brand new volume of missing person cases. Thank you for watching and subscribe for more videos. You'll hear from us soon. On May 28, 1966, 6-year-old Larry Jeffrey, who was vacationing with his family, arrived back to the camp and realized I'd like to hear from you. Thanks. Hikers found skeletal remains which were then identified as Jackson, and the cause of death was first determined as a result of injuries sustained from a fall. However, later on, officials changed their story and reported that he had died from exposure. Up at the camp and drop him off at the shop when the car repairs were done. But when his friend arrived, all he found was Matthew's abandoned tent with a few of his things still inside. The friend then notified authorities and a massive search was under each, a 47-year-old experienced hiker ventured off into the Nevada desert in search of a strange cave he had spotted during a previous hike near Death Valley National Park. According to a comment he left on YouTube, the cave was odd and had a strange entrance that resembled the letter M. As he approached, he claimed to have felt a strong vibration engulf his entire body. The closer he got, the more the vibration intensified. Whatever was inside, Morgan Heimer of Wyoming was reported missing after failing to return from a hike in the Grand Canyon National Park. He was working as a guide for the Tour West Company, and the group was on day 6 of an 8-day trip when he went missing around the 213 River mile marker near Pumpkin Springs on the Colorado River. 3 ground teams and 1 river team searched hundreds of square miles, but no trace of Morgan was ever found. Morgan was last seen wearing a blue flannel, a flotation device, brightly colored shorts, and he was park for a small hike. Park video surveillance showed him entering the park but never leaving. He was reported missing by his family soon after failing to return home in a search camp, and was possibly headed to Pine Valley, Pine Falls, or the Blackcone Trail. Nelson was expected to emerge on his return at Big Sur Station from Sykes in the Pine Ridge Trail, but he never did, friends said. China Camp is high and deep in Lost Padre National Forest, and despite search and rescue efforts, no trace of Arvin has ever been found. He is just one of several dozen hikers who have vanished within the last decade in the Lost Padre National Forest. and set off on a day hike with a college friend. By afternoon, the friend decided to return to the campsite, saying that Joseph had headed off alone to climb to Taylor Peak, but Joseph had never returned. Park rangers and at least 150 volunteer searchers combed through the mountainous terrain for days on end without anything else was ever found. After the hikers arrived back at their destination, they notified park officials and a search was conducted. Searchers combed through several thousand acres but found no sign of Audrey. The investigation was called off after several days and Audrey was never heard of again. One thing I'd like to point out about Audrey's case, which seems to be disturbingly common in many others, are the shoes and how the person seems to vanish while in back of the line. If that's not strange enough, rescue dogs fail to pick up any scent in the vast majority of these cases. What do you think? In 2015, we saw a large number of people vanish mysteriously within our state and national parks. The majority of these poor folks were young men between the ages of 20 and 30 years old. As far as we know, every one of them was in excellent shape, intelligent, and had no intentions of slipping off the radar. And even if they did, why aren't we able to find them, and when or if we do, why such under strange circumstances? There's no doubt something ominous is happening. Join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest national park disappearances out there. Number 10. In May 1977, 18-year-old Bernard Ross vanished from the Baxter State Park near Ashland, Maine. At the time of his disappearance, he borrowed his aunt's truck and went for a long drive to clear his mind. That was the last time he was ever seen. The truck was later found undamaged and some of his personal items still inside, including his wallet and various food items. Nothing appeared to be stolen and foul play was ruled out. Friends and family stated that Ross was not suicidal and had every intention of returning the evening of the day in which he disappeared. The search for Bernard was suspended after several days, and no trace of him was ever found. Number 9. On September 12, 2015, 25-year-old Lucas Richardson was reported missing from Summit Creek Trail in the Pioneer Mountains of Idaho after he failed to show up for work the following Monday. Search and rescue teams working with both the Blaine County and Custer County Sheriff offices had exhausted their efforts of more than 50 square miles in extremely rugged terrain. Searchers have found no clues about which route Richardson might have taken. The search employed canine dogs, a drone, ground teams, and mountaineering teams to scour the steep rocky terrain. Searchers had to contend with snow, ice, rain, fog, high winds, and ridge temperatures that dropped as low as 15 degrees. We have conducted a thorough search of the area, and at this point, feel that further searches will not yield any new clues, a lead investigator stated. He added that despite it being one of the largest searches conducted in many years, we are simply out of places to look. Richardson was known as an avid outdoorsman and enjoyed bouldering, rock climbing, and was working as an arborist. This case remains unsolved. Number 8. On August 6, 2007, Christina Kaleka, 20 years of age, was last seen in Rainbow Falls Provincial Park on the coast of Lake Superior. Christina was camping with her female cousin and 2 male friends from a Christian youth group when she disappeared. She was reportedly jogging alone in the early hours of August 6th. Volunteer search groups and cadaver dogs comb the rugged, heavily wooded parkland and hiking paths that cut along precarious cliff ledges. Despite these combined efforts, no trace of Christina was ever found. This case remains a mystery. Number 7. In November of 2007, a 63-year-old University of Oregon professor named Daming Suhu vanished during a hike to the summit of Olauli Mountain in the Three Sisters Wilderness just east of Eugene, Oregon. Daming was last seen on November 4th by some hikers who said they saw him near the summit, and his car was discovered at a trailhead on November 6th. Over 60 mountain rescue personnel from several counties participated in the search for Daming, and eventually they found $20, a candy bar wrapper, some footprints in the snow, but couldn't track down Daming's exact location, even with the help of half a dozen cadaver dogs and night vision equipment. The search was eventually suspended after 8 days. Number 6. In June of 1978, a 35-year-old German musician set out for a week-long trip in the Trinity Wilderness to gather inspiration for an album he was working on. Klaus Dunst took his guitar, backpack, and plenty of supplies before heading out. It was believed that he was headed for Diamond Lake and had planned to stay there for a few days before returning. A friend that he was staying with became worried when he didn't show and eventually reported him missing 2 days after he was due back. The search and rescue effort was coordinated, and over 100 workers set out to find Klaus, including members of law enforcement, the military, park rangers, Boy Scouts, and many volunteers. After several days, they located his vintage Gretsch brand guitar lying in a field 6 miles east of the lake and surrounded by extremely rough terrain. But nothing else was ever found, and Klaus was never heard from again. Number 5. On November 16, 2015, a 22-year-old Kashikan man named Justin Nathan vanished inside the Tongass National Forest while descending from Deer Mountain in Alaska. His 17-year-old hiking companion reported that he had been drinking and, quote, could not make it down the mountain. He left him at the second overlook with some extra clothing and supplies before hiking down the 3,000-foot peak to notify park authorities. When they returned with the search party, Justin was gone. On the day he was reported missing, there was a fresh layer of snow that had fallen, and searchers did not see any tracks leading off the trail. The search intensified on the second day as rescue dogs were utilized. More and more rescue personnel continued to pour into the area, and on the fourth day, a helicopter was summoned to help aid in the search. Despite these efforts, no trace of Justin was ever found. No tracks, no scent, no clothing. In the days following his disappearance, rough weather moved into the area, and after 5 days, the search was eventually suspended. Number 4. In July of 1992, the body of a 12-year-old boy who disappeared while hiking in the Sierras was found. Kenny Miller vanished the previous month after becoming separated from his parents in June while hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail. He was last seen throwing pebbles into a small stream in the upper Truckee River Canyon region about 3 miles north of Carson Pass. Deputies stated that the parents walked a short distance to look at a cabin, and when they returned a few minutes later, the boy was gone. Kenny's body was found in rocky terrain at approximately 9,800 feet in elevation. The area where Kenny disappeared was only about 8,000 feet. Authorities were baffled how the 12-year-old could have scaled 1,800 feet through extremely rough terrain. A CHP helicopter crew tried to retrieve the body earlier that day, but the craft was unable to land due to bad weather. When conditions improved, they returned to the site but could no longer locate the boy's body. After 9 days and as many as 250 people, the search was eventually called off. Number 3. In July of 1991, a 12-year-old Boy Scout named Jared Nagrete vanished on the summit of Mount San Gorgonio, which sits at 11,500 feet in elevation. Jared grew tired about 1,000 feet from the summit where the scouts were headed, and he was told to wait there. He would eventually be collected on the way back, the scout leader told him. However, when the troop returned, Jared was gone. An extensive search turned up signs of Jared. There were footprints, his backpack, food wrappers, and a disposable camera. The camera had photos that were estimated to be taken after Jared became separated from the group, and one photo appeared particularly interesting. It shows Jared in extreme close-up. It was probably taken by Jared himself, and some reports say that Jared looks frightened in the photo. After several days, the search was called off and Jared was never seen again. Number 2. In July of 1952, a 10-year-old girl named Constance Christine Smith, or Connie Smith, vanished mysteriously while picking daisies. She was spending part of the summer at Camp Sloan in Salisbury, Connecticut. On that clear July day, Connie had made her way down the winding dirt driveway that runs through the camp. Her tent mates were off eating breakfast, but Connie decided to skip the meal. She told the other girls that she was going to the camp dispensary to return an ice pack that she had borrowed the previous evening after falling out of a tent and hurting her hip. But instead, with just a week of camp remaining, Connie left the ice pack in her tent and walked on past the stone pillars that marked the camp's entrance. She turned right on Indian Mountain Road and paused to pick some daisies. That was the last time anybody saw her. Her disappearance kicked off a massive search and rescue effort involving hundreds of teams and covering thousands of square miles. Eyewitnesses, park staff, and many others were questioning her disappearance, but authorities were left with more questions than answers. The girl's father, Pete Smith, flew into the area to help Aiden in the search for his missing daughter, but there was no trace of her, even after 5 decades of searching until his death in 2012. This was one of the largest search and rescue efforts ever recorded for a missing person case in the U.S. Number 1. On September 14th, 2015, a 36-year-old backpacker from Orange County named Timothy Nolan was found dead in Yosemite National Park during an extensive search effort. Timothy planned a solo trip through the park from September 4th through September 9th, but he never returned from the hike. His last contact was with his family on September 1st. For nearly a week, searchers combed through hundreds of square miles using dogs, helicopters, and several search and rescue teams. His body was eventually spotted off a well-traveled trail in the High Sierra Camp Loop that was searched numerous times previously. Investigators were never able to determine the exact cause of death. Nolan was the 3rd man found dead in the park during the month of September of this year. On September 2nd, a 39-year-old named James Millett Jr. was found dead after an intense 3-week search. Then on September 6th, the body of a 24-year-old University of Nevada student named Matthew Baldwin was found as well. In all 3 cases, the men's bodies were found in areas previously searched. All 3 were well-experienced hikers, in great physical shape and carried protection. As for their cause of deaths, the investigation is, quote, still ongoing, end quote. As we say goodbye to 2015, we should never forget those we lost and should never give up hope in searching for them. They're out there somewhere, and we'll find them. But in the meantime, I suggest extra caution while visiting outdoors, and not just in our state and national parks, but also inside any wilderness areas. Stay in groups, carry a transponder, carry protection, and keep your senses sharp. Thanks for watching and subscribe. Just this year alone, many people have already disappeared under the strangest of circumstances. For example, many of the people who vanish do so when they're by their lonesome, and they tend to do things like venture off into the worst places possible, and are sometimes found in areas that defy all logic. Sometimes these people are found in areas already previously searched and without shoes, and just sometimes they are never found at all. Join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest national park missing person cases out there. Do know that these are only a fraction of cases that are brought to the surface, while many others are brushed aside or hidden from the public. Number 10. In April of this year, a 21-year-old man named Darian Lucero, also known as Spirit Sparrow, was camping with his dog near the North Fork of the Sacramento River near Lake Siskiyou and Mount Shasta when he mysteriously disappeared. Not much else is known about this case except that Darian was a transient with very little family and friends. He was a solo traveler and spent the majority of his time connecting with the outdoors. He also had a dog whom he was very close to, and eventually the dog was found wandering in the Shasta wilderness about 30 miles from the camp. This case remains unsolved. Number 9. On July 30th, 2007, an 80-year-old hiker and backpacker named Tarina Bonaventura disappeared near Vogel Singh High Sierra Camp in Yosemite National Park. Adrian Freeman, a representative of the park, reported that over 1,000 people, including people on foot patrol, air patrol, and dog teams, joined in on the search effort to find the missing woman. Tarina was described as an experienced hiker, but had various hip and knee problems that would inhibit any prolonged amount of time spent out on hikes. Searchers are baffled how the 80-year-old could simply vanish given her age and limited physical capabilities. To this day, she has never been found. Number 8. In November of 2014, a 25-year-old Broomfield man named Peter Jeffrey was reported missing after failing to show up for work after a weekend hiking trip in the Rocky Mountains. Search and rescue teams of nearly 100 people combed through 20 square miles of terrain, including alpine, subalpine, and heavily forested wilderness. Extreme winter weather delayed search efforts, but eventually stabilized, allowing the search to continue after a couple days. Several days after his disappearance, helicopters located his body 200 feet below ledges of the Glacier Gorge drainage system, which is completely off course from his intended target of Long's Peak. Park officials reported that after the body was located, a team was flown to a landing spot, then climbed approximately 1,800 feet to reach the body. The body was found in a very rough area of the park, and it was stated that most people wouldn't even think to hike in such rugged terrain. Peter's cause of death is still being investigated according to the Boulder County coroner. Number 7. On Sunday, September 20th, 2015, at approximately 4:30 p.m., the Cochise County Sheriff's Office was advised of an abandoned vehicle in Rustler Park near Portal. The caller advised that the vehicle was in a camping space, but there had not been anybody around it for several days, and when he checked the interior of the car, he noticed some animal food and a camping mattress along with a park pass, which was issued on the 13th and was valid for only 2 days. Sheriff's deputies responded to the area and located the 2015 Mazda parked in the camping space. Upon checking the license plate, it was discovered that the registered owner, Mr. Lawrence Cosden, was listed as a missing person by Tucson Police Department with a last known contact date of September 14, 2015. Search and rescue teams combed the area but could not locate him. To this day, he has never been found. In the area that Lawrence disappeared near the Jericohua National Monument, 2 other more well-known cases broke the news. A disabled woman named Janet Casterden and a park ranger named Paul Fugit disappeared in that area as well and have never been found. Number 6. In September of 2013, a 64-year-old Ohio attorney named Gene George went missing while climbing Mount Harvard in Colorado. Despite a massive search and rescue effort, there was no sign of Gene, and the search was eventually suspended after several weeks. Then in March of 2014, several months after Gene's disappearance, a 20-year-old Colorado Springs hiker discovered the wallet belonging to Gene near the trail leading up to the summits of Mount Harvard on Mount Columbia. Soon thereafter, some of his clothing was located, and that eventually led searchers to human remains. Tests confirmed that it was that of Jean George, but no cause of death was ever released. Number 5. In December of 2014, a 60-year-old man named Jim Griffin vanished during his hike in Olympic National Park. Griffin went for a day hike on December 22nd and was reported missing on Christmas Eve when he failed to show up at a dinner. His backpack was found on Christmas Day about 50 feet off of a trail. A can of soda, coffee cup, and a bag of freeze-dried food were left sitting on a nearby log. Nearly 24 people completed an intensive grid search within 1,000 feet of the backpack and eventually widened their search on steep slopes and heavy brush. The backpack was found approximately 1/2 mile from where Griffin left his car. Immediately after he vanished, weather conditions began to worsen and the search was eventually put on hold. About a month later, after his disappearance, in late January of 2015, search crews backed by dog teams recovered the body of Griffin about 1/3 of a mile and nearly 1,000 vertical feet above the Boulder Creek hiking trail in Olympic Peninsula's Elway Valley. He was found without his shoes and in an area that is not easily accessible and rarely traveled, said park rangers. Number 4. On September 12, 2015, a 52-year-old White Rock man named Neville Jewell parked his vehicle in the Cypress Mountain parking lot and set out on the Howie Sound Crest Trail. Around 2 p.m. that day, he texted his girlfriend to say he had made it to the West Lion and that it had been a strenuous hike. That was the last time anybody heard from him. Cypress staff noticed his vehicle had been seemingly abandoned the following day and asked West Vancouver police to investigate. North Shore Rescue, joined by volunteers from search and rescue outfits from Lions Bay, Surrey, and Maple Ridge, planned to stay in the area for a few days before deciding whether to continue the search or not. Quote, "It's very remote out here, and we've been searching relentlessly for 10 days now. We've had near-freezing temperatures most of those nights, including a significant storm over the weekend. It is very unlikely anyone could have survived out here this long under those conditions," end quote, said Doug Pope. He added, "When it's 1 to 2 degrees Celsius and wet, it can cause hypothermia quite quickly. For someone that's not well prepared, with no extra clothing, no shelter, and no real outdoor experience, it would be difficult for somebody to survive 10 days at this time of year up there." After 2 weeks, the search for Neville was called off and he was never seen again. Number 3. On February 13, 2016, a hiker traveling in the Angeles National Forest saw an abandoned backpack below the Pacific Crest Trail, southeast of Little Jimmy Campground. Believing it belonged to another person on the trail, he left it alone. The next day, that same hiker was traveling back from his hike and saw the backpack was still sitting there. He opened the backpack and found an emergency telephone number and called it, reaching the victim's mother in Kansas. She explained that it belonged to her 32-year-old son, Kyle Hunt. An immediate search of the area was initiated by search and rescue teams, lasting late into that night at high elevations of over 7,000 feet and in very cold and icy conditions. The missing hiker's vehicle was located a couple days later on a remote road near a trailhead off of Big Rock Creek Road near a small enclosed campground. That same day, personnel located Kyle's body on a steep, icy slope approximately 500 feet below the Pacific Crest Trail. He was found without any shoes. It is believed that Hunt began a solo hike on Friday, February 12, 2016, with the intention of returning on Sunday, February 14th. He was reportedly an experienced, avid hiker whose death shocked family members and those closest to him. Quote, A preliminary investigation indicates the incident appears to be a recreational accident, according to a sheriff's statement, though an exact cause of death was never released. Number 2. In March of this year, a 2-year-old named Chase Martins disappeared while playing outside of his farm home in Austin, Manitoba. Initially, it was thought that Chase had simply wandered away from the home, but after a statement released by the parents, that was an unlikely scenario, considering he never went anywhere without the family dog with him. During the time of his disappearance, the dog was found sound asleep on the porch. When search and rescue were unable to locate Chase in the first couple days of the search, they expanded their efforts and many more volunteers joined in on the effort. Over 400 people on foot and horseback searched creeks and shorelines within a 3-kilometer radius of the home. Dive teams were brought in eventually, since most of the dry land around the property had already been combed over. After several days of intense searching, the boy's body was found in a nearby creek that had already been searched several times. Authorities said that the body of water where the boy was found was only about a half a kilometer from his home. Over the years, this same exact scenario has played out in many other cases, where the missing individual is located in an area that had already been previously searched numerous times. Number 1. One of the latest and most recent national park disappearances involved that of a 22-year-old Louisiana woman named Diana Zacharias, who vanished mysteriously at the south rim of the Grand Canyon National Park, the same area where numerous others have vanished, including Morgan Heimer, Justin Kramer, Drake Kramer, and Bryce Gillies, all within recent times, and they have never been found. On April 3rd of this year, the Grand Canyon Regional Communications Center received a phone call reporting a missing individual last known to be at the south rim of the Grand Canyon National Park. Zacharias was reported missing by a family member. She arrived at the south rim via Arizona shuttle on April 2nd and was dropped off at the Maswick Lodge. She is believed to have visited Yaqui Point and Lookout Studio. Zacharias is described as 22 years old, 5'2", 104 pounds, with short black hair and brown eyes. She was last seen wearing a pink hat, purple fleece, black rimmed glasses, and possibly carrying a small green backpack. I chose this case as number 1 because it is one of the most recent disappearances out there, and time is of the essence in the search to find her. Anyone with any information on the location or whereabouts of Diana should contact the National Park Service's Silent Witness line at 925-638-7840. And there you have it. 10 more of the strangest national park missing person cases out there. If there is something we learned from these poor folks, it is that nobody is as safe as they might imagine while venturing out into our favorite national parks and wilderness areas. The summer season is already quickly approaching, and there are things you can do to minimize your chances of becoming another statistic. Travel in numbers, carry a phone, GPS unit, or transponder, and never turn your back to Mother Nature. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos. For many hikers, campers, and outdoor enthusiasts, the summer season has been a rough one. Just this summer alone, dozens of people have vanished under the strangest of circumstances. Despite modern-day technology and coordinated efforts of thousands of professional searchers and volunteers, many of these folks will never be found. For the friends and families of those missing, they will never find closure. Join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest national park missing person cases out there. Before we get underway, I thought I'd update you on the case mentioned in my previous video. Last June, a 26-year-old man named Colin Everett vanished inside the Palisades Interstate Park. About a month later, a body was found about a quarter-mile north of State Line Lookout within the park and in a very remote area. The victim was believed to have been in a fenced-off area closed off to the public and away from main trails when the victim plummeted to the cliff ledge below. Paramus and Parkway police are investigating to determine the identity of the deceased. A cause of death is still pending. I'll keep you updated when or if the results are ever released. Number 10. On June 24, 2010, Bill Awasco, a 65-year-old businessman from Marietta, Georgia, arrived in Joshua Tree National Park. He had planned multiple day hikes and gave his wife a list of trails he was attempting to hike. But when Bill failed to call his wife by the next morning, she notified park authorities. A few days later, a search helicopter spotted his rental car at the Juniper Flats Trailhead parking area. Juniper Flats was the starting point for one of Bill's planned destinations to Quail Mountain. Based on statements from another hiker, Bill's car had been left there sometime between 10:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. on 6/24. Search teams assembled at this location and headed out that night. The last sign of Bill was a ping from a cell phone at 6:50 a.m. on Sunday, June 27th. This ping registered the phone as being 10.6 miles away from the Sarin Drive cell tower in Yucca Valley, California. Because there is only one cell tower, it is impossible to know exactly where Bill was. Over the next week, rescue teams using dogs and horses covered 800 miles of ground and also received support from multiple aircraft. On July 5th, the official search was called off. The search turned up nothing except for a red bandana, which was never confirmed as having belonged to Bill. Bill was a Vietnam vet, experienced hiker, and in excellent condition, according to friends and family. Bill's disappearance is one of many who have vanished inside the park and has never been found. Number 9. Also in the summer of 2010, the Genevieve County Sheriff's Office received a call about a vehicle parked for several days inside Holland State Park. When officers ran the license plate, the car was registered to that of a missing 35-year-old woman from Scott County named Michelle Irene Boyd. Immediately afterward, approximately 80 firefighters and other emergency personnel became involved in the search for her. Based on the location of the car, authorities believe Michelle had gone walking on a nearby trail, which is where they focused their efforts. Searchers say a yellow lab from Eureka Search and Rescue found the body after 2 p.m. the following day about a half a mile from her car. The woman was found so far off the main trail and in extremely rough terrain that authorities believed she would have never been located had it not been for the search dog. Investigators were unable to determine the cause of death, yet ruled out suicide or foul play as a contributing factor. What's strange about this case is that there have been little to no updates following her disappearance since 2010. In fact, I was unable to find a picture of the woman after numerous online attempts. To this day, her cause of death still remains a mystery. Number 8. On May 14th, 2008, Brandon Swanson, aged 19, was headed to Marshall, Minnesota. Sometime while driving his car, it crashed into a ditch, leaving it temporarily immobilized. Brandon ended up calling his parents and asked them to come pick him up, and even though they went looking for him, they were unable to find him. After his father called him back, Brandon said that he would head to the nearby town of Lind so that it would be easier to locate him. In the middle of the conversation, however, the call was suddenly cut off. The police were notified, and soon thereafter they found his car, but they never located him or his cell phone. Phone records later showed that the teen was nowhere near Lind, where he told his parents he would be. His cell phone calls were traced to a tower 20 miles away in Minnesota. It is speculated that he may have drowned in a nearby river, but no trace of his body was ever found, despite extensive search and rescue efforts. Brandon vanished near the Upper Sioux Agency State Park located near the Yellow Medicine River in Minnesota. He was just finishing up his last day of classes at Minnesota West Community and Technical College when he disappeared. Number 7. In June of 2011, a hiker mysteriously vanished inside Yosemite National Park after failing to return from a day hike he was on with members from his church. 30-year-old George Penka was thought to have ventured into Upper Yosemite Fall Trail, or any trail between Yosemite Valley and Tioga Road. A full-scale operation was initiated on June 18th, including approximately 105 search and rescue personnel from around the state. Agencies involved in the search included about a dozen different groups from Yosemite National Park Search and Rescue, Inyo County, Mono County, Mariposa County, Marin County, Fresno, China Lake, Los Angeles, Nevada, and several others, just to name a few. But after several days of an intense, extensive search, nothing turned up and the search was eventually scaled down. 3 weeks after his disappearance, the search was concluded altogether. After 5 years, there is still no trace of George. His disappearance is joined by countless others in the Yosemite area, some of which I've covered in previous videos. Number 6. In October of 1984, a 3-year-old girl named Laura Bradbury vanished inside Joshua Tree National Park in Arizona. The 3.5-year-old disappeared from Indian Cove Campground in the park during a family camping trip. The girl accompanied her 8-year-old brother to the portable restrooms near the campsite. He went inside one of the restrooms while she waited outside, but when he came out seconds later, his sister was gone. Within a day of her disappearance, about 250 searchers along with horses, dogs, and helicopters had spread out across what was then Joshua Tree National Monument, scouring the ravines and maze-like interior of the nearby wonderland of rocks, but Laura was never located. Mike Bradbury, the girl's father, accompanied a bloodhound that followed what was then believed to be tracks from Laura's flip-flops for about 2 miles before the dog lost the scent. 3 days after she vanished, the county sheriff's department called off the wide-scale search. A couple years later, in 1986, a girl's skull was found in the region, but upon further examination, it did not belong to Laura according to dental records and forensic analysis. Even after 25 years since her disappearance, Mike Bradbury continues to search for the truth of what happened to his daughter. There are a lot of parallels between this case and another one that took place in 2015 inside the Chiricahua National Monument, also in Arizona. A 44-year-old woman named Janet Casterton vanished outside of a restroom while waiting for a family member and has never been found. Number 5. In the summer of 1999, a 34-year-old man named Joe Wood, a book editor from New York, disappeared during an afternoon hike on Mount Rainier. He was in town for an important conference and had arrived early, so he traveled out to Rainier and decided to do some bird watching a day before the meeting, but he never left the park. Friends and those expecting him reported him missing, and a search party was conducted involving hound dogs, rangers, volunteers, and 2 helicopters. That same night, a national tragedy occurred when JFK Jr.'s plane disappeared. Unfortunately, this directed a lot of media attention away from Joe Wood, and news of his disappearance was spread thin. His search was eventually suspended after weeks, and to this day he is still missing. This is not the first time anyone has disappeared on that mountain. According to some estimates, there are approximately 50 people still missing in that region. Number 4. On June 18th of this year, the Grand Canyon Regional Communications Center received a call reporting a 52-year-old hiker missing in the extreme western portion of the Grand Canyon near the Parashant National Monument. Floyd Roberts III was last seen wearing a red long-sleeve shirt, blue jeans, multicolored mesh Nike sneakers, a blue Alpine backpack, and white-rimmed sunglasses with orange lenses. Roberts and his party were on day 1 of a 3-day backpacking trip. The responding resources included 7 ground teams and a National Park Service helicopter. Searchers from Grand Canyon Parashant National Monument and Mojave County helped aid in the search for Roberts. But despite these combined efforts and the bright clothing that he was last seen wearing, he is yet to be found. The area the team was searching is rugged and covered in thick brush. Transportation to the area takes several hours. The area he disappeared in is a region most people would avoid for safety reasons, and searchers are baffled how anyone would enter these areas at all. In the 2 months since his disappearance, search efforts have been greatly reduced, yet there are still a handful of people looking and keeping the case active. Number 3. In March of 2014, a 39-year-old Indiana man named Dr. James McGrogan disappeared after becoming separated from fellow hikers during a hiking trip near Vail, Colorado. He and an experienced group of hikers were on their way to a backcountry hut. Search crews spent a combined 1,000 hours searching for the missing doctor, but bad weather complicated search efforts. And after several days, the search and rescue mission became a recovery one. Then on April 3rd, a couple weeks after he vanished, Eagle County Sheriff's Department received a report of a deceased male located near the Booth Falls area north of Vail, Colorado. The reporting party, a group of backcountry skiers, told authorities they located the deceased individual in an ice fall below Booth Falls. Authorities confirmed the identity of the body to be that of McGrogan, who was found 4.5 miles from the trail he disappeared. Eagle County coroner stated that the 39-year-old died of multiple injuries, including head trauma. His death has been ruled an accident, but I decided to include this case because there are a number of strange factors surrounding his death that many media outlets failed to address. His body was found in an extremely rugged area far off course from the hiker's intended destination. And again, like many other cases, he was found without any shoes. David Paulides, an investigative journalist, highlights this case in his Missing 411 series. You can check out this case and many more like it at www.canamissing.com. Number 2. In July of 1995, a 32-year-old German exchange student living in California named Martin Knapp set out on a 20-mile solo hike through the Trinity Wilderness. Though it is unclear which trail he specifically ventured onto, he told a friend that he would depart from one of several hikes in the Trinity Divide region and would return within 3 days' time. Well, those 3 days came and went, but Martin never returned to the agreed meeting spot. The friend waited several hours before calling the authorities to report him missing. The night he disappeared, dozens of park rangers and volunteers gathered to coordinate a search and rescue effort. On the second day of the hike, search dogs picked up a scent leading into a well-traveled canyon where they found Martin's Walkman cassette player approximately 10 miles from where he began his hike. The next day, hikers called park officials to report that they found some scattered belongings that they thought belonged to the missing man about 3 miles from the Walkman. Some of these items included a pair of hiking boots, sweatband, a broken hunting knife, and a used first aid kit. Family members confirmed that they belonged to Martin. This reinvigorated search efforts, but after 2 weeks, no other trace was ever found. What's really sad about this case is that it was given very little media coverage, and given how long it's been since his disappearance, information on this case is very difficult to find. Martin is just one of many hikers to vanish in what some are calling the never-ending sea of wilderness. Number 1. On July 27th of this year, a 21-year-old hiker named Riley Zekel vanished in the Jefferson Wilderness area near the Willamette National Forest in Oregon. He was last seen hiking the Pacific Crest Trail north of Jefferson Park when he spoke to another hiker that same day. Approximately 400 searchers spent over 5,000 hours in a 7-day period looking for Riley before suspending the search. Search and rescue crews from more than 10 agencies across the state assisted in the search using helicopters and contacting hundreds of other hikers. The Lewis and Clark student from California told family he planned to stay overnight in the Jefferson Wilderness on July 27th. His silver Mazda was found at the park entrance with no clues leading to his whereabouts. Riley was an experienced hiker according to the sheriff's office. He was carrying at least 4 days' worth of food, a water filtration device, and other outdoor equipment. Riley's disappearance is eerily similar to that of another young man who disappeared in that area as well. Just 4 years previous, 32-year-old Jake Dutton vanished while planning an overnight camping trip. His car was also found at the park's entrance. But we're not done yet. That same year, a 52-year-old hiker named Ronald Ulm disappeared in that area as well. And in 2007, a 63-year-old college professor named Daming Su failed to return from his hike. These are only a small fraction of cases that have been covered by the media, while many others have gone under the radar. I chose this case as number 1 due to the sheer number of missing hikers that have never been found despite extensive search and rescue efforts. And there you have it. 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. If there's a case you'd like to bring to my attention, please do so in the comments below or send me a message. Also, if there are any details you'd like to provide or update us about these cases, I'm sure we'd all appreciate that. Like an approaching storm, always be prepared for what may be heading your way. Expect the unexpected and never turn your back to sweet Mother Nature. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos. Well, here we are at the tail end of summer with plenty of new cases that need to be addressed. I think it's painfully obvious that there have been more missing person cases in the last few months than any other time during my research. Join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. Note that these are only a small number of cases being covered by the media, while many others are brushed aside and are simply fading away. Number 10. Sometime in the late evening of July 15th, 2006, a 24-year-old man vanished during his hike up the Romero Canyon trailhead in the Los Padres National Forest in California. Hans Arduarter was last seen by other hikers who say they were heading back while he was just setting out. The elderly couple who last saw him stated that they thought it was odd considering how late in the day it was for someone to be just starting their hike. Because of this, they were able to give a detailed description of the man when they heard about his disappearance several days later. Hans was reported missing by his family on July 19th, which kicked off a brief but extensive search of the area involving several dozen search and rescue teams equipped with search dogs, firefighters, park rangers, and volunteers. They located his vehicle at the trailhead, but no other trace of him was ever found. After 3 days, the search was scaled back, and after a week, it ended altogether. It's been over 10 years since Hans disappeared, and no information has come forward since. The Los Padres National Forest has claimed many hikers over the years, including a 34-year-old firefighter named Mike Herdman, who vanished in the park in 2014 and was eventually found dead weeks later under strange circumstances. Then a 55-year-old Big Sur resident named Arvin Nelson mysteriously vanished during a hike in 2014 and was never found. These cases were given a decent amount of media coverage, while many other cases were given hardly any at all. Number 9. In July of this year, a 25-year-old paramedic named Eric Pratt vanished without a trace outside of his residence near the Bear Creek Lake Park area in Colorado. The last time anybody saw Eric, who worked for the South Park Ambulance District, was just before midnight on July 22, 2016. Eric and his fiancée invited a few friends over for drinks at their Lakewood residence, and after the get-together, both Eric and his fiancée took the trash out and headed back inside. But before doing so, Eric told her that he needed to take a short walk to get some air. She went back inside, but he never did. Authorities say foul play has not been ruled out, but there is no indication any harm has come to Eric either. In fact, there have been no real clues at all. He never had any talk of suicidal thoughts or anything like that. It's almost as if he just walked away, stated Steve Davis from the Public Information Office for the Lakewood Police Department. The days after Eric's disappearance were filled with volunteer searches surrounding his apartment complex and the surrounding parkland. Cadaver dogs were also utilized, but so far nothing has turned up. Quote, "We've exhausted all leads and haven't come up with anything," said Davis. There have been no activity on Eric's cell phone, credit and debit cards, or his social media pages. Police are hoping that anyone out there who may have seen anything will come forward. Family members have told local media outlets that the disappearance is extremely out of character for Eric, who loved his job and has never done anything like this in the past. Because of its proximity to some heavily wooded areas, I decided to include this case in this segment. Number 8. In May of this year, a well-respected 59-year-old Arizona State University English instructor named Deborah Schwartz vanished somewhere inside a northern Arizona canyon. She was several days into her solo camping trip when she disappeared. Immediately afterward, a large search effort was coordinated involving dozens of search and rescue members from surrounding counties and the Arizona Department of Public Safety, along with helicopters, search dogs, and teams on horseback. About a week after her disappearance, a 3-member technical rescue team was searching a slot canyon below the rim of Oak Creek Canyon when they discovered her body. Quote, "This technical rescue team completed 2 rope rappels to make their way into the canyon to a spot where they were able to see the body, and then a 3rd rappel to actually reach the body," according to Jerry Blair with the Coconino County Sheriff's Office. Schwartz's body was found about a half a mile from her Palm Flats campsite, where she had been staying for several days. According to those who knew her, she was in an excellent physical shape and was looking forward to spending some time in the outdoors after a semester of teaching. Her cause of death is still pending an investigation according to the Coconino County Medical Examiner's Office. Her death came as a shock to many, as she was well known for giving back to the community. Number 7. In February of 2015, a 28-year-old hiker named Chris Sylvia vanished during a 4-day solo hike along the Pacific Crest Trail between Anza and Campo, just north of Warner Springs in California. The 28-year-old has not been heard from since February 16, when he telephoned a friend and said he wanted to be picked up. The friend was supposed to meet Sylvia on February 17th at a meditation center, but he never showed. Several days after his disappearance, a hiker found a pair of hiking sandals and an empty package of freeze-dried stew near Tool Spring. Mary Litch, the hiker who made the discovery, stated that one of the shoes had an empty package of beef stew that had been folded up and tucked inside. Litch took a cell phone photograph of the items and emailed it to the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. Quote, "I left the shoes where they were. I unfolded the package of food just so I could see what it was, and I put that down next to the pair of shoes and took a photo," Litch said. The location of the sandals was about 6 miles north of the sheriff's search area in Chihuahua Valley. Search teams eventually found Sylvia's camping gear abandoned near the rendezvous point of Chihuahua Valley Road. Nancy Sylvia, the boy's mother, said her son was a fairly experienced hiker, and she does not believe Chris was suicidal. Authorities added that many people hike there by their lonesome, and it is considered by many to be a very safe place to hike. Number 6. 10 years ago, in September of 2006, a then 47-year-old inventor disappeared inside the vast wilderness of Denali National Park in Alaska. Richard Lehman Griffiths of Spokane, Washington, invented what he called a survival cocoon and decided to test his idea there. Sergeant Ben Sewell of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police stated that, in all likelihood, he went missing in September 2006 but was not reported until August 2007. He never told anyone where he was going exactly, but officials have reason to believe he set out in an area containing 13.2 million acres of sheer wilderness. Quote, "We were able to go back to that year and track him," Sewell said. Mounties found where Griffiths paid for a bus ticket north. They tracked him to where he had been dropped off by the bus along Alaska Highway. He left some of his gear at a lodge near the White River. He told people there he was going upriver to McCarthy, an outpost town in the Elias Park in Alaska, to test his orange cocoon. Then he marched off into nothingness. Before taking off, he told friends in the southern U.S. that he, quote, might winter over in Alaska, Sewell said. They didn't worry about him for months. When a woman in Florida finally called Mounties wondering if anyone had seen the then 47-year-old man, she had no idea of where to look for Griffiths. Searches in this area are always difficult because of the huge glaciers, the jagged mountains, the sheer remoteness, harsh weather, and the limited search and rescue resources. But the search for Griffiths was especially difficult. Quote, "Nothing new has ever surfaced," said Sewell, who still wonders if some part of that orange survival cocoon might pop up somewhere, someday, even though he knows the odds are against that. Number 5. In June of 2008, a 27-year-old camper named Adalbert Mueller vanished while camping at the Hobo Gulch campground in the Shasta Trinity National Forest. His 1991 CJ7 Jeep was still parked next to the entrance when officials conducted a routine check. His tent was found undisturbed with many of his personal items still inside, including clothes, camping supplies, a flip phone, and an ice chest filled with expired food. Registration records show that he checked in on June 2nd and planned on leaving the park the following weekend. He was officially reported missing on June 11th, nearly 2 weeks after checking in. It was estimated that Mr. Mueller vanished sometime within the first few days of his camping trip, based on what other campers observed. Authorities believed he may have gone for a short hike, but are unsure where exactly, considering the limited number of trails in the general area. After several days of an intense search by park rangers and dozens of volunteers, the search was eventually called off. To this day, no trace of Mueller was ever found. Number 4. In September of 2015, a 39-year-old Kentucky man named Glenn Austin Oldfield disappeared inside the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in Washington state. On September 17th, he texted his girlfriend to let her know that he was planning on spending 2 weeks camping in southwest Washington, according to a sheriff's news release. 2 days after he was reported missing, 2 hunters talked with him near Lone Butte, approximately 31 miles north of Carson. Oldfield told the hunters that he was lost, but when they attempted to show him the way to the road, he turned and ran the opposite direction. The hunters were taken back by this odd behavior and also noticed that he wasn't wearing any shoes. He seemed completely normal until they reached the road, where he immediately turned around and sprinted back into the wilderness. About 50 people gathered to form a search party where they spent the next several days searching for him. They eventually found his car in a campsite, but he was nowhere to be seen. Even though Austin had planned to contact his home on October 1st, 2015, September 17th was the last time anybody heard from him, and to this day, he remains missing. Number 3. In October of 2010, a 31-year-old hiker named James Nelson went missing during a 5-day, 25-mile backpacking trip in the Holy Cross Wilderness near Vail, Colorado. His fiancée reported him missing on October 8th after he failed to show up at their agreed meeting spot. Within the next several days, 116 people, including police, family, friends, and volunteers, searched for more than 1,000 hours for Nelson. The search for the missing Ravenwoods man became extremely difficult due to extremely rough terrain, bad weather, and limited resources. The Eagle County Sheriff's Department suspended the search efforts after nearly a week. Then in May of 2012, almost 2 years after James disappeared, a hiker stumbled upon an abandoned campsite in the forest about 50 feet off of the Holy Cross Jeep Road near an abandoned mining camp. He took pictures of it and reported it to the authorities. When they arrived to examine the site, they found scattered items, including some camping and hiking gear, credit cards with James's name on them, and a journal which indicated that he may have been suffering from altitude sickness. Several yards from the campsite, human remains were eventually discovered and then identified as James. Police added that some of Nelson's gear, including a camera, GPS unit, and camp stove, were missing from the site. They also stated that the campsite was found a bit off course from Nelson's planned route. Quote, Nelson had planned to start his hike at Half Moon Campground, follow Fall Creek Trail past Lake Constantine, and go over the Fall Creek Pass and pass Holy Cross City. Nelson then planned to hike Fancy Pass Trail over Fancy Pass and continue downstream along Cross Creek Trail. Nelson had intended to hike up East Cross Creek and then follow Half Moon Pass Trail back to the parking lot. Number 2. On July 4th, 2012, a 66-year-old runner named Michael Lamontre vanished during a 3-mile trail race up Mount Marathon in Seward, Alaska. The annual event is held every 4th of July and involves hundreds of men and women from all over the U.S. In the entire history of the race, which began in 1915, no one has ever failed to return. The first few minutes of the race was the most difficult, and witnesses say Michael Lamontre had no problem making it beyond this point. But that's where things get a little strange. Witnesses also state that he was within eyeshot of several others, and nobody noticed anything suspicious. He just disappeared. A large search and rescue effort was coordinated by the Alaska State Troopers, search dogs, local volunteers, and even the friends and family of Lamontre, all of whom continued to search through the rest of the summer. But despite the vast number of searchers and resources utilized in the search, no trace of Michael was ever found. Number 1. In late August of this year, a 50-year-old hiker named Gordon Sagu went missing in the Cheam Mountain Range in Chilliwack, British Columbia. Gordon, an avid trail runner from North Delta, went missing while hiking with 2 other people near the Baby Monday Peak. Sherelle Budai was hiking the trail with Sagu and another hiker at the time he went missing. She stated that Sagu separated from the group to explore some other peaks and planned on meeting them just before returning to the trailhead. She also stated that, quote, we thought Gordon was right ahead of us on the trail. We could see him right in front of us in the distance. But when we got to the trailhead, he wasn't there, so the other hiker went back looking for him. Budai said that her partner could not find any trace of Sagu, and so they both drove back to Chilliwack. The pair immediately called for search and rescue as soon as they had cellular reception. Search crews from Chilliwack, Lions Bay, and Surrey searched the area around the peak all day that day, but no sign of him was ever found. Search personnel with experience hiking in extreme terrain was also called in to assist. Gordon was carrying at least 3 liters of water with him at the time he disappeared, and was very familiar with the region they were hiking. He was seen as a leader, an expert in the outdoors, and was always well prepared. Hundreds gathered in the search for Gordon, but he is yet to be found. Though this case may be a couple weeks old, there are many people still actively searching for Gordon, including friends and family. I'll keep you updated on this case as we continue to learn more about it. And there you have it, folks. 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. As we say goodbye to the summer season, we should never forget all of those poor folks who never made it back home. They're still out there, and perhaps we'll find out what happened to them in due time. If you've lost a loved one or know of a case that you'd like to share with our listeners, please shoot me a message on my YouTube channel, and I'll do my best to respond in due time. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, folks, and subscribe for more videos. And there you have it. 10 more of the strangest national park missing person cases out there. This just goes to show you that no matter what time of year or how well you think you may know the wilderness, you too can disappear just like these poor folks did if you're not cautious. And with the warmer months ahead of us, there's no doubt these strange missing person cases will only continue to pile up. I'm Rusty West, and thank you for watching, and subscribe. If you enjoy the outdoors as much as I do, then you'll find yourself fixing to spend some quality time relaxing and connecting with Mother Nature. Even if safety is your number one priority, it doesn't guarantee that things will go accordingly. For the cases you're about to hear, that's exactly what happened. Join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. Note that these are only a small number of cases available to the public, while many others go under the radar, are withheld, and sometimes brushed aside. Number 10. In September of 2016, a 74-year-old hiker named Peter Jackson disappeared inside the Yosemite National Park while out on a day hike from his campsite at White Wolf Campground. On September 17th, the day before he was reported missing, he had sent a text message to his son explaining his plans, which park officials were able to confirm. His vehicle was found at the campground, and camping fees were paid as far out as September 21st. After 2 weeks of intense search efforts, the search for Jackson was placed in continuous limited mode until the case went as cold as the approaching autumn chill that began to set in. As far as we know, Jackson was in excellent physical condition for his age, with no medical issues. He was well prepared for the hike and knew the area and the outdoors well. As mentioned in previous videos, many folks have disappeared inside that park as well and have never been found. Number 9. In January of 2017, a 35-year-old woman whose name has not yet been released disappeared inside the Brackley Beach area of the Prince Edward Islands National Park. Police stated that park officials discovered her abandoned vehicle inside the park with an expired permit. All of her personal belongings were still inside the unlocked vehicle. Police dogs and helicopters were called in to join the search effort, as well as dive teams and several dozen professional search and rescue outfits. 10 days after she went missing, her body was discovered on the shore not far from her vehicle and in an area previously searched several times. Autopsy reports confirmed that she had not drowned and there was no physical signs of trauma on her body. She was found without any shoes. The identity of the woman's name is being kept private as requested by the family. Number 8. On August 2nd, 2014, a 59-year-old Sonoma County man named Steve Morris disappeared on a hiking trip with friends in the Trinity Alps wilderness, just north of Weaverville in eastern California. Steve was ahead of the group during the descent of Billy's Peak when he disappeared. Nobody thought twice about it because he was a very experienced hiker. Concern began to set in when the three friends returned to the campsite with no trace of him. After search and rescue teams spent a week of combing through treacherous terrain, they called off the search altogether. That's when Steve's wife took over. She took it upon herself to scour the 7,000-foot high mountains with a handful of volunteers that involved 2 professional trackers, 2 helicopter crews, relatives, friends, and parishioners from her church. The expensive cost of the search effort lasted for nearly 12 weeks before resources ran dry and the search for Steve officially ended. To this day, no trace of him was ever found. Number 7. In June of 2013, a 51-year-old man named Dale Staling disappeared inside the Mesa Verde National Park in southwestern Colorado. Dale and his wife planned to stay at the park for a few weeks and were only 4 days into the trip when he disappeared. On the day he disappeared, he told his wife that he was heading off on a small hike to the Spruce Tree House Ruin, an attraction whose path is reportedly steep, but only 1/4 mile long and completely paved. After 2 hours, his wife became concerned and raised the alarm. This set off a 2-week search effort that included as many as 60 rescuers, 4 helicopters, 2 dog teams, and rope teams that rappelled off the cliffs in the area. But despite these combined efforts, no trace of him was ever found. Number 6. In October of 2006, an 8-year-old boy named Samuel Boelke vanished inside the Crater Lake National Park while out on a camping trip with his father. On the second day of the camping trip, the two set off on a small day hike near the campsite when the two became separated. The father stated that they were on the trail when he peered off to his left to look at a group of birds that were making sounds. When he looked back, the boy was gone. Horsemen, mountain rescue squads, and hundreds of volunteers with search dogs combed the entire north rim of Crater Lake for several days. Rescue specialists from as far as northern Washington and southern California joined in the search effort, but no trace of him was ever found. Despite some low-level signs of autistic behavior, Samuel was not known to wander off by his lonesome. To this day, he remains missing. Number 5. In December of 1946, a 22-year-old Bennington college student named Paula Weldon decided to go for a hike along the long trail which runs along the crooked spine of the Green Mountains in Vermont. She informed her roommate of her hiking plans and said she would return shortly. Before she entered the park, she had gotten directions from a newspaper delivery worker and set off into oblivion. Witnesses reported seeing her enter the long trail, but she was never seen again. The FBI got involved, as did the state police from Vermont and Connecticut. Her case gained national attention within days of her disappearance, and here's why. Starting in 1945, a string of strange disappearances occurred on the trail, baffling experts. For the next few years, 7 people would vanish on that trail as well, never to be seen again, including a man named Mitty Rivers, James Telford, Paul Jepson, a woman named Frida Langer, Martha Jones, and Francis Christman. A few theories surfaced and speculated that the disappearances were the work of a possible serial killer, or a possible spike in animal attacks. But despite these search and rescue efforts involved in each case, no trace of these poor folks were ever found. In 1992, a New England author named Joseph V. Citro coined the term Bennington Triangle in the area of where these people vanished and were never seen again. As recent as 2017, people continue to disappear within the Green Mountains under mysterious circumstances. Number 4. In July of 1938, a 4-year-old boy named Alfred Beelharz was on a hike with his family in the Fall River region of Rocky Mountains National Park when he vanished. The boy fell behind on the trail, and when the family turned to look for him a moment later, he was gone. The family then frantically searched the area before requesting assistance from park rangers. Initially, the searchers and rangers assumed the boy had gotten into a nearby creek which paralleled the trail, so they dammed the creek and dragged it for over 6 miles. Next, they focused their efforts on land, bringing in bloodhounds that were able to detect a scent to where the boy had disappeared, and then they sat down. At the time of the boy's disappearance, a couple was hiking approximately 2,500 feet above the Fall River Trail when they heard a very strange sound coming from above them on a place called Devil's Nest. The witnesses were stunned to then see a small boy walk out onto a ridge, peer out, and walk out of sight again. An elite team of climbers and rescuers were dispatched to the area after the couple reported the sighting, but no trace of Alfred was ever seen again. Number 3. On January 6, 2010, a 37-year-old Alameda woman named Catherine Truitt was reported missing by federal park rangers at Point Reyes National Seashore in Marin County, California. Her pickup truck was found abandoned at the parking lot with 2 of her dogs still inside, and she had a 3rd dog that was found leashed to a nearby rock. Prior to her disappearance, Catherine sustained a neck injury which, combined with a pre-existing spinal problem, left her with chronic pain. Given this, those who knew her stated that she wouldn't have wandered off very far, let alone go anywhere without her dogs. An extensive search of the park turned up no clues of Catherine. But shortly after her disappearance, another woman disappeared in that area as well. A 77-year-old woman named Sylvia Lang, an experienced outdoor enthusiast, vanished just 8 miles from the location Catherine did and was never found. Number 2. In March of 2000, 2 people jogging on Mount Baker in Washington State spotted a shred of clothing hanging from a nearby tree. Upon further investigation, they discovered an SUV plunged over a steep embankment, but no sign of anybody was inside or nearby. The vehicle was found close to an abandoned logging road, and police were then able to identify the Jeep belonging to a missing 23-year-old college student named Leah Roberts. Just 9 days earlier, Leah left her home in Raleigh, North Carolina, and had mentioned her traveling plans to a friend, stating that she had hoped to make it to a place called Desolation Peak near Mount Baker. She was inspired to travel to this area after reading a book called The Dharma Bums that encourages the reader to leave behind the materialism of modern life. She had secretly wanted to follow in the footsteps of the author of the book, Jack Heroic, who had found peace and tranquility on that peak. So just 3 months shy of graduating from college, she decided to turn her dream into reality. She packed up all of her belongings and set off on the 3,000-mile journey across the country. But before doing so, she left a note for another friend stating that she was not suicidal, but just quite the opposite. When her SUV was examined, it was full of Leah's belongings, a large amount of cash, an empty cat carrier, and personal family heirlooms. There are many interesting facts surrounding Leah's disappearance, and I strongly encourage all of you to do an online search of this. Number 1. In October of 2016, a 31-year-old man named Melvin Birch set out on a hike with his 2 dogs in the Columbia River Gorge in Washington State. He had planned a day hike at the Table Mountain area north of Bonneville Dam when he went missing. The day after Melvin disappeared, employees at the Bonneville Hot Springs Resort saw his dogs at his car, which was parked at the trailhead. Deputies spoke with the dog's owner, who was Melvin's friend, and she stated that he had texted her a photo from what appeared to be the top of Table Mountain at 2 p.m. just the day before. There were no text or calls after that, she stated. Authorities were then able to pinpoint Melvin's cell phone location, and his body was found a short time later within 50 yards of the phone. Those who knew Melvin were shocked to learn that he had fallen from the summit of the mountain to the base, approximately 700 feet below. He was found nearly naked and without his shoes, which baffled searchers considering how moderate the temperatures were during that time of year. Those who knew him stated that he was in excellent shape and very well experienced in the outdoors. Even though his body was eventually found, I chose this case as number 1 due to the sheer number of cases that involve people being found without their shoes and clothing, and sometimes at the base of a very steep cliff. In fact, you may remember the recent case of a young woman named Annie Schmidt mentioned in my previous video, who went missing in that park as well, and was found in a very similar situation just last year. Also in 2016, a 37-year-old woman named Elisa McCran vanished, but we're not done yet. In 2010, the body of a 24-year-old missing hiker named Catherine Weather was found at the base of an 800-foot high cliff after she went missing for more than a week. The Columbia River Gorge has claimed so many lives over the years. That's just one more reason I chose to make this case as number 1. And there you have it, folks. Just 10 more of the strangest state and national park missing person cases out there. And the list goes on and on. If you find yourself itching to get outdoors, there are measures you can take to minimize your chances of disappearing as well. Nothing's for certain, but if you prepare yourself for emergencies, carry protection, travel in numbers, and keep a level head, then you just might ensure your chances of survival and a safe return back home. I'm Rusty West, and thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos.
Hi everyone, this is Carl Underwood filling in for Rusty while he's out enjoying a little R&R, recharging those batteries, and spending some quality time with the fam. In this video, you're going to hear 10 more of the strangest national park missing person cases that we've been able to piece together. Now I'm going to spin things just a little differently than what you're used to hearing, but that's okay. Rusty has his way and I've got mine, and that's what makes it so unique. Prepare to have your brains rocked because many of these cases defy any rational means of explanation. You may want to take some notes so that you can follow up with some research of your own and come to your own conclusions about what's happening with these people. So let's go ahead and dive headfirst into the strangeness of these missing person cases. Kicking things off at number 10, we have Dr. Susan Behrens, a 30-year-old optometrist who disappeared on April 4th of this year inside the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon. Search and rescue teams were notified by the woman's family a few days after she was due back. Now searchers combed the park and eventually located her Toyota Prius at the entrance of the Eagle Creek Trailhead. It was not known where she intended to go exactly, but family stated she was an experienced hiker who had researched the trails in the area prior to entering the park. A few days after she went missing, air crews spotted her body in an area near a remote waterfall and miles off course from where officials thought she was heading. There was no obvious cause of death, and searchers found her without any shoes. In the last couple of videos, Rusty mentioned several other disappearances and incidences that occurred within this same park. That's just one more reason you won't find me aching to venture out into this park anytime soon, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Number 9. In October of 2016, a 34-year-old hiker named Chris Fowler, also known by his nickname Sherpa, was last seen inside the White Pass area of the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington State. His journey began way back in Campo, California, which is near the Mexico border, on May 7th. He hiked for months and loosely followed the trail, occasionally stopping to admire various sights or to spend a night or two in a small town. He made regular contact with friends, family, and even made updates on his social networks. But a few months after his journey began, he eventually reached White Pass but was never heard from again. A team of searchers searched 100 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail in the area where he was thought to have disappeared. But according to a local paper, two hunters talked with Fowler on October 22nd at Blowout Mountain in early November, but to this day he remains missing. According to Wikipedia, the Pacific Crest Trail is a long-distance hiking and equestrian trail closely aligned with the highest peaks of both the Sierra Nevada and Cascade mountain ranges, which lie 100 to 150 miles east of the Pacific coast. This trail has claimed so many hikers over the decades that I could spend weeks talking about these cases. Here at number 8, we have Garen Kirk, a 31-year-old outdoorsman who often took solo trips out in the wilderness for fishing and hiking adventures. This was his goal when on December 6, 2014, he arrived at Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon. Garen left his home in Portland on December 3rd with plans to return by December 6th. It wasn't known where he intended to hike exactly, but his Pontiac Grand Am was eventually located inside the parking lot of Frog Lake Campground. There was an estimated 200 volunteers and search and rescue personnel who searched the area, including several dog teams and surveillance aircraft which used infrared technology to scan for traces of body heat from above. According to reports, this was one of the most sophisticated searches ever conducted in the Mount Hood National Forest area. Unfortunately, despite everything that was thrown at this, Garen is still missing to this day. I thought I'd mention that Mount Hood National Forest is located less than an hour's drive from Columbia River Gorge. That name keeps resurfacing in these kinds of missing person cases. Number 7. On December 7, 2005, a 35-year-old hiker named Michelle Vanek went for a hike with her longtime friend Eric Sawyer on the 14,000-foot high mountain of the Holy Cross in Eagle County, Colorado. The pair began their journey at 6:30 a.m. that morning and accidentally took a much more difficult trail than they had originally planned and ended up getting separated hours into the hike. At some point, Michelle began to lag behind Eric and eventually ran out of water about 400 yards short of the summit. She then told her hiking partner to continue on without her and that she would drop anchor and wait for him to return further down the trail. But when he returned, there was absolutely no trace of her anywhere. An extensive, week-long search of the mountain turned up no indication of her whereabouts, and that was the last time she was ever seen. Strange disappearance number 6 goes to a 51-year-old hiker named Michael Faisiri, who was last seen June 15, 2005 while hiking alone near the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in Yosemite National Park. He had gone on a trail that goes around the north end of the reservoir, and then he changed his mind and headed up to Pacific Crest Trail instead. His family became concerned when he failed to return on June 19th when his wilderness permit expired. On June 21st, they called the Park Service and a search was launched. According to the Charlie Project, searchers found Michael's backpack in the park near Tilton Mountain just off the trail. The location was not on his planned route and was on, quote, extremely rugged and hazardous terrain, according to search and rescue coordinators. A bottle of water, a camera, and a topographical map were found missing from the backpack. Based on this, it's safe to assume it's not like he just aimlessly wandered into the wilderness unprepared. No, something else happened to this guy. Those who knew Michael stated that he was a very experienced hiker with over 30 years of knowledge and experience in the outdoors and backcountry wilderness. This reminds me of a time that I once went hiking in the Trinity Wilderness and came across an abandoned backpack that was just filled with clothing and survival gear that nobody had claimed in the entire 3 days that I was there. Strange, makes me wonder what happened to the person who owned it. At number 5, we have a 22-year-old mountain biker named Jacob Gray who disappeared inside the Olympic National Park after failing to report back to his family, also in April of this year. He left his home in Bellevue, Washington for a mountain biking trip on the evening of April 5th, and the following day, park officials found his bike and camping gear on the side of Soul Duck Road inside the park. Park rangers then conducted a hasty search inside the area where his belongings were found. They later concentrated their search efforts around the Soul Duck River, and members from the Olympic Mountain Rescue Team got involved. By April 14th, the entirety of the area was searched and even combed through with search dogs and several dozen professional search and rescue personnel. Now, despite these combined efforts, no trace of Jacob has ever been found. As things currently stand, the search is still in continuous limited mode. This is the same park where several other people have vanished within the last few years, including a 47-year-old state government official named Gilbert Gilman, who disappeared in 2006, and also a 31-year-old Milwaukee man named Garen Kirk, who I just talked about at the very beginning of this video. What's even stranger about this case is Jacob disappeared on April 4th of this year, the same day that Dr. Susan Behrens disappeared, which I mentioned at number 10. Number 4. Now here's a case involving the mysterious disappearance of a 9-year-old boy named Christopher Vigil, who in April of 1978 went missing inside Poudre Canyon in Colorado. He was hiking just slightly ahead of his family on Gray Rock Mountain Trail when he vanished. Immediately after he disappeared, a huge storm invaded the area, complicating all search and rescue attempts that soon followed. After the weather had dissipated, the search continued, but no trace of Christopher was ever found. David Paulides, the author for the Missing 411 books, goes on to explain this case and many more other strange cases that involve children who seem to vanish into thin air under the noses of their parents in similar situations like this one. You wouldn't believe how often this happens, and despite the monumental search and rescue efforts involved, these children are never found. Number 3. Teresa Schmidt. On September 6, 2002, Teresa and her husband traveled to the Lost Valley Guest Ranch in Colorado. The 53-year-old experienced hiker then went for a solo hike near the lodge where they had been staying around 3 p.m. that day on a trail leading to a rocky overlook east of the ranch. Now, she was reported missing by her husband 4 hours after setting off on the hike when she failed to return back. It wasn't until the wee hours of the following morning that the search efforts began. Nearly 70 volunteer searchers, tracker dogs, and helicopters scoured the area for days on end, and after a week, inclement weather moved into the area and hampered search efforts. The only sign of Schmidt that was ever located were 2 sets of footprints near the Cheeseman Overlook, which is approximately 7 miles from the ranch and a difference of 1,100 feet. The peak tops out at 8,700 feet, while the ranch is only about 7,600 feet in elevation. This is just one of hundreds of strange disappearances that have occurred within the wilds of Colorado in recent years. Arriving at number 2 on this list is Kieran Burke, a 44-year-old Irish native who traveled to California for a 2-week holiday excursion, including a 3-day Yosemite hiking trip. Unfortunately, things didn't go quite as planned for Kieran. He arrived at Curry Village within the park on April 5th and was on a day hike when he went missing. His rental car was discovered a few days later on April 11th, with most of his personal effects still inside. He did, however, bring his camera with him, so given this, the search did not begin until the 11th, nearly a week after he was last seen. An extensive search of the park produced no evidence as to his whereabouts, and even after 17 years, no trace of him has ever been found. Once again, according to author David Paulides, Yosemite National Park contains the highest number of mysterious disappearances of any other park that we know of. If you've never heard of this guy by now, be sure to check him out. That's David Paulides, Paulides. Finally, last but not least, here is number 1. In June of 2001, a 45-year-old hiker named Corin Osborne was dropped off at Devil's Lake Trailhead, also in Oregon, by his father at 6 a.m. on June 17th. Osborne, an experienced and athletic outdoorsman, planned to climb to at least one, perhaps all of the Three Sisters Mountains, a hiking distance of about 40 miles. It was near the summit of the Second Sisters Mountain that he was last spotted by other hikers. He was supposed to meet his father at 9 p.m. that same day at Lava Camp Lake Trailhead, but never arrived. His father reported him missing immediately. At the time of his disappearance, Corin was carrying a heavy-duty reflective space blanket and a day's worth of food and water. An extensive search of the Three Sisters Mountains turned up no sign of him, and in the days and even hours following his disappearance, temperatures dropped below freezing, and to this day, this case is run cold. So with that said, never go hiking out in Colorado or Oregon for that matter. Just kidding. If you do, please proceed with extreme caution, as these places make up a shockingly large percentage of these strange missing person cases. And as Rusty would say, never go by your lonesome. If I ever end up in one of these places, do me a favor and call search and rescue ahead of time, because my weaselly little self wouldn't last more than a few minutes out there. Thanks for joining me, and stay tuned for more material coming your way. Carl over and out.
Hello folks, this is Rusty West and I have returned from my travels. I wanted to thank Carl for filling in for me while I was gone. I also wanted to thank you all for being patient with him these last several weeks. During my travels, I ended up visiting some old friends of mine as well as some distant relatives. I also spent a little time inside a couple of the national parks that I've discussed in previous videos. In one of these parks, I did have a strange experience that I would like to share with you all eventually during the upcoming interview with Carl. But for now, join me as I count down 10 more of the strangest national park missing person cases out there. Note, Most of these cases on this list are included because of how new they are, and I believe there still may be hope in finding a few of them alive. Number 10. As recently as May 3rd of this year, a 24-year-old Navy service member named Alexander Sevier disappeared inside Yosemite National Park. He was staying in housekeeping camp and had spent the previous few days hiking around Yosemite Valley by his lonesome. Alexander traveled to the park from Virginia on May 1st and had only intended to stay at the park no more than a few days. Neighbors at the camp told rangers that he would go out for day hikes but would always return by evening. It was on the third day of his stay when he disappeared. Rangers and search and rescue personnel combed several of the more popular hiking trails such as Yosemite Fall Trail and the Mist Trail, two of the spots where it was thought he may have ventured out on. They also used search dogs and helicopters brought in by the California Highway Patrol, and more than 30 people became involved in this search effort, but to this day, not a single trace of Alexander has been found. Sadly, his disappearance joins a large number of those who vanish within that park every single year. Number 9. In February of this year, a 41-year-old fisherman disappeared from the banks of the South Holston Lake near Bristol, Tennessee. James Matthew Reagan, an experienced outdoorsman, was last seen by witnesses fishing on the lake near the U.S. Highway 421 bridge on February 10th. Crews from Kingsport, Greenville, Bean Station, and Washington County, Virginia were among those who participated in the search and rescue efforts, which lasted several long days. A few days into the search, the Sullivan County Emergency Management issued a regional call for more assistance. The Bean Station Rescue Squad conducted several searches in the waters surrounding James's disappearance, but little was ever found. But eventually, searchers found his overturned canoe upstream from the 421 bridge near his campsite in a small cove further north of the bridge. It was noted that the water levels were lower than usual, and currents were slower than they would have been given that time of year. It was speculated that James was wearing a life preserver and was well equipped for bad weather. Even after several months, his disappearance continues to baffle many. Number 8. Another recent case involved that of an experienced 28-year-old hiker who went missing for 5 days inside Ferguson Canyon in Utah. Benjamin Kritzer, who recently moved to Utah from North Carolina, had planned a day hike within the canyon on April 6th of this year before disappearing. Family members notified park authorities after Benjamin failed to check in by the end of that day, which was very unusual for him given how well he communicated with his family. He did, however, text them a picture of a wildflower, but authorities were unable to pinpoint where exactly that photo was taken from. A large search ensued, and a few days later, his vehicle was found at the trail's entrance, but there was no sign he was anywhere nearby. A few days after that, searchers discovered his body nearly a mile up the canyon and approximately 200 yards off the nearest trail. Police Lieutenant Brian Lorkey concluded that Benjamin had suffered severe injuries consistent from a fall, but couldn't exactly determine where he fell from given how flat the terrain was where searchers found him. What makes this case so strange was how he ended up at the location with his injuries, and it was also noted that this same spot had already been searched several times previously prior to the discovery of his body. Number 7. July of 1957, a 2-year-old boy named David Allen Scott vanished inside the area of Twin Lakes near the mountains of the Sierra Nevadas. The father was watching the child just outside of the camping trailer that they had been staying in when he turned his back for one moment. When he looked back, the boy was nowhere to be found. The area they had been staying in was considerably small, but with good visibility, according to park officials. Hundreds became involved in the search effort, and several days later, they found the boy on top of a neighboring mountain many miles away. The boy was found shoeless, and searchers were completely baffled how the boy ended up on the mountain to begin with in such a short time and so many miles away from where he vanished. During this time, another 2-year-old boy disappeared and was found under similar circumstances. He disappeared from his country home and was found 19 hours later flying face down on an ice-covered pond 24 kilometers away. Number 6. In July of last year, a 68-year-old hiker named John Lee vanished inside the Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park in California. He was last seen in the vicinity of Mount Whitney by one of his hiking companions, who also indicated that John decided to change course due to the difficulty of the trail they were on. He then departed from his friends to find a safer and easier route for them to descend on. Over the next several hours, the party united, then set out to find John. They eventually located his backpack hanging from a granite ledge where they waited several hours for him to return. But when he failed to do so, the other hikers left and believed they would meet him at the bottom of the trailhead. But when the group arrived later that day, he was nowhere to be found, and a search party was called in to help look for him. This got the attention of several search and rescue outfits from Inyo County, Marin County, Bay Area Mountain Rescue, Placer County, Sierra Madre, and the California Air National Guard. A total of 98 staff and volunteers searched the mountain, using 2 K9 teams and 4 helicopters. A short time later, it was one of those helicopters who spotted John Lee's body at the base of the southwest slope of Mount Whitney at approximately 12,500 feet in elevation and miles away from where his backpack was found. The cause of his death is still under investigation, and his remains were transferred to the Tulare County for further analysis. I'll keep you updated on this case as I find out more. Number 5. In July of 2015, a San Carlos resident by the name of Harold Drake was reported missing after failing to return from a hike in Pfeiffer Big Sur State Park in California. The 76-year-old experienced hiker was last seen leaving his campground with a gallon of water and some snacks, telling a friend that he was planning on a long day's hike. But when he failed to return from that hike that night, the friend then notified park authorities, and a search and rescue operation was conducted. The Monterey County Sheriff's Office set out on the park's 2 main trails by 11 p.m. that night, and for several days, the search intensified and began to spread out into the Big Sur River Gorge area, which is miles away from where officials thought he intended to go. But despite these efforts, and nearly 2 weeks of searches, no trace of Harold was ever found. Friends state that he was an avid hiker who knew the trail system in the park like the back of his hand, and even helped to build many trails around his hometown for over 40 years. Unfortunately, Harold's disappearance is joined by several others who went missing in that park as well, including Arvin Nelson, who vanished in 2014, and also Maria Boisa, who did so shortly after him, also in 2014. Number 4. In September of 2003, a 57-year-old man named Larry Franklin vanished inside Jay Cook State Park in Minnesota. He was reported missing 3 days after failing to check in with his family, where then park rangers eventually located his abandoned vehicle at the park's entrance unlocked, with most of his personal effects still inside. Despite the 8,000-acre sized park, there are only a limited number of trails fit for human use. Given this, searchers were able to comb these areas several times over. Park officials were completely perplexed how the 57-year-old just vanished under the umbrella of coverage provided by the search and rescue outfits. And to this day, Larry remains missing. Number 3. In July of 2008, a 19-year-old college student named Wesley Brooks vanished inside the Smith River State Park in Montana while out on a rafting trip. The University of Montana student traveled to the park with several friends and had planned to stay in the park from July 15th to the 18th before returning back home. On the second day of the trip, the group left their campsite at Camp Baker Campground, climbed into their raft at approximately 10 a.m., and by noon, the tour guide decided to pull up to a sandbar so the group could take a rest and have some lunch. The group decided to stay at the spot for about an hour before setting off. But before doing so, they noticed that Wesley hadn't returned from the nearby woods where he went to relieve himself. The remaining 6 rafters then split up and spent about 2 hours searching the area, but all they could find were his lunch bag, life vest, and his towel on the beach where he had been sitting. At the time of his disappearance, the other rafters were either lying on the sand or swimming nearby, and hadn't noticed anything unusual. The tour guide radioed in for help, and soon thereafter, a team of 60 search and rescue personnel showed up and combed the beach and nearby waters. On the third day of the search, police dogs picked up a scent approximately 2 miles inland from where Wesley disappeared. There, they found his shoes, swim trunks, and his headphones, but no other sign of him was found. The search continued for nearly 2 weeks before being scaled back and eventually called off altogether. Nearly 10 years later, this case continues to baffle experts. Number 2. On March 13, 1997, 4 young men vanished inside the Estrella Mountains National Park in Arizona. Glenn Leiter, Mitch Adams, Ryan Stone, and Jacob Reynolds were all last seen off-roading in the area prior to their disappearance. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office began investigating the case, and eventually, a suspect was arrested. However, he was released a short time later due to lack of evidence and conflicting statements by the county's medical examiner's office. Bone fragments were later found in the area and determined to be the cause of animal attacks. But an official statement admitted that there was not enough evidence for the results to be conclusive. To this day, this case remains unsolved. During this time, a very strange event occurred in the skies over Phoenix, where thousands of folks witnessed seeing strange lights hovering above them in an abnormal formation. Some people have speculated that this mass sighting, known as the Phoenix Lights, had something to do with the disappearances. In fact, there was a movie based on this released this year called Phoenix Forgotten, which is purely fictional, but does raise some pretty interesting questions about what happened to these men. Number 1. In April of this year, A 20-year-old college student and outdoor enthusiast was reported missing inside Olympic National Park after failing to return from a weekend camping trip near Staircase Campground. Zach Krull recently moved to Olympia to begin his freshman year at the Evergreen State College due to his love of the outdoors, and had also expressed interest in becoming a park ranger. Over 70 people searched the area, including air support from Whidbey Island and King County. Searchers did find a set of footprints in the snow, but were unable to determine if they were his or not. His family described him as a person very much in tune with the wilderness. If the details of this disappearance sound familiar to you, it's because another young man vanished in that park around the same time and even area as Zach. In the previous video, Carl mentions a 22-year-old named Jacob Gray who went missing while biking during a camping trip. Searchers were able to locate his bike along with a trailer full of camping gear, but to this day, both men are still missing. It wasn't until recently that both Carl and I discovered the connection between these two cases. If you take a look back into the park's history, you'll discover a long list of disappearances that go back several decades, and we've only covered a few of these disappearances so far. And there you have it. 10 more of the most bizarre national park disappearances out there. If there's a case you'd like to bring to my attention, feel free to post a link on my YouTube channel, and I'll do my best to address it eventually. Also, feel free to update us on any of these cases should any new information become available. Be safe out there, folks, and you'll hear from me soon. Thank you for watching and subscribing.